Welcome to Story Run, a cinematic adventure story. Tonight's episode, The Intation. Wales had cost him something. Not blood, not bone. Something quieter. Tony Reyes came home to Ealing with scraped hands and a chest that felt lighter than it should have. The fortune was thinner now. He could feel the difference in the small things. A coin that rolled under the fridge. A train missed by 12 seconds. The world no longer leaned in his direction. He had given back what wasn't his. And somewhere in the network, a vault in Wales breathed easy for the first time in months. But the map was not finished. The call came at 3:14 in the morning. Tony's phone lit up the dark bedroom. Not Ruth's number, not Callum's, not Layla or Gareth. Unknown. Tony stared at the screen. His body was still sore from the Welsh cliff. His hands were still healing. The scratches on his palms had scabbed over, but his muscles ached every time he turned in bed. He answered. Antonio Reyes. A woman's voice. Young, sharp, Scottish accent, but controlled, like someone who chose each word before speaking it. Tony sat up. Who is this? Railway depot? Severn Tunnel Junction. Tomorrow, noon. Tony's jaw tightened. That's not an answer. Come alone. Don't tell Ruth. The line went dead. Tony stared at the phone. The screen faded to black. The room was dark again. Rain tapped the window. Steady, patient. Don't tell Ruth. That was the part that caught him. Because everyone Tony had trusted in the past 6 months had come through Ruth. She was the thread that connected the keepers, the coin network, the field teams. She was the one who had found him in Edinburgh, the one who had sealed a vault beneath London with her own blood. And someone inside the keeper network was telling Tony to leave her out. Tony set the phone down. He pulled the map from his backpack on the floor. The Welsh fracture was stable. Gold, calm, but near the Severn estuary, a faint new mark had appeared. A circle with a line through it, like a zero, or a door. Tony traced it with his finger. The ink was warm, not hot, not urgent, just present. He folded the map. He did not sleep. The next morning, Tony looked up Severn Tunnel Junction on his laptop, a tiny village in southeast Wales, near the mouth of the Severn Tunnel, the old railway tunnel that connected England to Wales beneath the estuary. The village was mostly residential, a few farms, a railway station that still operated, but barely. And on the satellite view, Tony found the depot. An old railway maintenance building, large, rectangular, rusted metal roof, set back from the main line behind a chain-link fence that had collapsed in sections. No cars in the car park. No lights in the windows. Abandoned, but not forgotten. Tony closed the laptop. He texted Ruth. Heard from anyone new in the network lately? Ruth replied in 4 minutes. Define new. Someone Scottish? Female? Direct? A longer pause. Then Isla Kincaid. Inner circle. Don't underestimate her. Tony stared at the name. Isla Kincaid. Ruth's next message arrived. If she called you, it's not a social visit. It's an interview. Tony typed, for what? Ruth, to see if you're worth the risk. Tony put the phone down. He looked at the kitchen, at the clean counters, at Maria's coat hanging by the door, at the flat that was warm and paid for and safe because of choices Tony had made with borrowed luck. He picked up the map. He packed. Tony caught the 9:15 from Paddington. The train crossed into Wales at the Severn Tunnel, and the light changed. England had been grey and flat. Wales was green and wet, the hills pressing close to the railway line like they were trying to listen. Tony watched the landscape through the window. His backpack sat between his feet. The map inside was still. No pulses, no heat, just the steady presence of something ancient waiting to be relevant. Halfway across the estuary tunnel, Tony felt his thumb throb. The blood seal. Not a pulse, more like a vibration. The way a phone buzzes when it's face down on a table. Subtle, easy to miss, but Tony didn't miss it. The vibration lasted 3 seconds. Then it stopped. Tony looked at his hand. The scar on his thumb was faint now. Months healed. But the skin there was always slightly warmer than the rest. The train emerged from the tunnel into Welsh daylight. Rain streaked the windows. Green fields stretched to hills that vanished into low cloud. Severn Tunnel Junction was a platform and a shelter and nothing else. Tony stepped off the train and the wind hit him sideways. Cold, wet, the kind of wind that came straight off the estuary and didn't apologize. He was the only person who got off. The platform was empty. A digital sign showed the next train in 47 minutes. A vending machine hummed against the shelter wall. A pigeon walked along the platform edge like it owned the place. Tony checked his phone. 11:23. 37 minutes early. He walked. The depot was a 10-minute walk from the station. Down a residential street, past a row of terrace houses with fog on the windows, through a gap in a hedge, and along a gravel track that ran parallel to the old rail line. The track was overgrown. Nettles and brambles pushed in from both sides. Tony's jeans caught on thorns. His trainers sank into soft mud. The air smelled of wet earth and rusted metal and something older, something mineral, like the air near the vault entrance in Wales. Tony slowed. That smell. He recognized it now, not from a memory, from his blood seal. The network was close, not a volt, not exactly, but something connected to it, the way a wire connects to a fuse box. Not the power itself, just the path. Tony rounded a bend in the track and stopped. The depot was enormous, bigger than it had looked on satellite. A long, wide building with an arched roof made of riveted steel panels. Most of the glass in the high windows was broken. Some panels had fallen inward, leaving dark gaps in the roof like missing teeth. The chain-link fence was down in 3 places. Tony stepped through the nearest gap and crossed the car park. Cracked tarmac, weeds growing from every seam. A rusted skip sat in one corner, half full of rain and leaves. Tony paused. A car was parked behind the depot, tucked behind a concrete wall, almost invisible from the approach. A gray Land Rover, mud on the wheels, no markings. Someone was already here. Tony moved toward the main entrance. Steel double doors, green paint peeling in long strips. One door was slightly open. He pushed it. The door groaned. The sound filled the space beyond. The interior was vast. A single space the length of a football pitch. Concrete floor stained with oil and decades of use. 2 sets of rail tracks ran through the center, rusted and buried under weeds that had pushed through the ballast from below. Gantries and walkways lined the walls at various heights. Metal stairs zigzagged up to platforms that served machinery that was no longer there. Light fell through the broken roof in scattered columns. Dust floated in the beams. Water dripped from damaged panels, hitting the floor in steady patterns that echoed through the space. And at the far end, under a section of roof that was still intact, a table, a desk lamp, extension cord running along the floor to a portable generator that hummed quietly in the shadows. 3 chairs, 2 of them occupied. Tony started walking. His footsteps echoed on the concrete. The sound bounced off the walls and returned to him from different angles, creating the illusion that someone else was walking alongside him. 20 meters from the table, the floor changed. Tony felt it through his feet before he saw it. A softness, a give in the concrete that shouldn't have been there. He looked down. A crack, wide, running across the floor from the base of a steel column to the edge of the rail bed. The concrete on either side of the crack had shifted. Not much, half an inch, but enough to create a seam that flexed under weight. Tony stepped over it carefully. As he did, his thumb throbbed again, stronger this time. The crack in the floor was not just damage. It followed a pattern. Tony traced it with his eyes. The crack ran straight for 3 meters, then curved, then turned at a sharp angle, then curved again. A symbol. Tony's breath caught. The crack in the depot floor was tracing the outline of a vault symbol, broken into the concrete by something beneath. Something that had been pressing upward for years, decades, maybe centuries. The depot had been built on top of something. Tony filed this away and kept walking. 30 meters from the table, he recognized one of the figures. An older man, white hair, straight posture. He wore a dark coat and sat with his hands folded on the table. Tony had never met him, but something in his bearing said authority. Not the showy kind, the kind that came from decades of holding things together that wanted to fall apart. The second figure stood, and Tony got his first look at Isla Kincaid. She was younger than he expected, mid-20s at most, tall, dark hair cut short at the jaw. She wore a wax jacket over a gray jumper, boots that had seen actual mud, and an expression that could have been carved from the same stone as the depot walls. Not hostile, not friendly, assessing. Tony stopped 3 meters from the table. "You're early," Isla said. "You didn't give me much to work with," Tony said. 3 a.m. phone calls tend to make people nervous. "Good," Isla said. "Nervous people pay attention." Tony looked at the older man. "And you are." The man studied Tony for a moment. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, steady, the kind of voice that never needed to be raised. "Drummond," he said, "I run the inner circle. What Ruth and Callum do in the field, I coordinate from here." Tony's chest tightened. The inner circle, the part of the keepers that even Ruth didn't talk about directly. The people who decided which vaults to watch, which threats to address, which assets to protect. Tony sat in the 3rd chair. "Why am I here?" he asked. Isla leaned against the table, arms folded. "Because you broke a vault in Wales," she said. "Because you gave back fortune that you could have kept." Because Eleanor reclassified you as a systemic threat 3 days ago. And because every decision you've made since Scotland has been a mixture of impressive and reckless, and we need to know which one wins. Tony held her gaze. That's a lot of reasons, he said. It's one reason, Isla said. We need to know who you are. Drummond pulled a folder from inside his coat. Not a tablet, not a phone. A physical folder. Manila, worn at the edges. No digital trail. He opened it and placed it on the table between them. Inside were photographs, printouts, a hand-drawn timeline that stretched across 2 pages. Tony leaned forward. The photographs showed vaults, not the ones Tony had entered. Others. A cave mouth in what looked like Norway, surrounded by snow and dark rock. A stone chamber beneath a city bridge. The river visible through a narrow gap above. A carved doorway, half buried in desert sand. The stonework precise and alien. A submerged entrance, visible through clear tropical water, green and deep. Dozens of them. Tony's breath caught. The network is global, Drummond said. You've seen 2 vaults. Scotland and Wales. There are over 300 that we know of. Some dormant, some active, some that have never been opened since they were sealed. Tony picked up a photograph. Clear, water, a stone entrance beneath the surface. Fish swimming past symbols that were older than cities. 300. He had thought the vaults were a British thing. Scotland, Wales, London, a system. Connected to the land he knew. His land, his island. 300. On every continent. Beneath oceans. How long have you known about them? Tony asked. The keepers have existed in some form for over 700 years, Drummond said. We don't open vaults. We monitor. We protect. We close what should not be open. He paused. But we are not the only ones who know. Tony's jaw tightened. Eleanor, the acquirers have mapped approximately 60% vault locations, Isla said. They've attempted to enter 9. Successfully breached 2. Both times, the vaults responded with destabilization events that took years to correct. Tony thought of the Welsh cliff, the crack in the land, the village shaking. What happened? He asked. Isla's voice was flat. A tsunami warning off the coast of Portugal that turned out to be real, and a sinkhole beneath a church in central Germany that swallowed the nave. Tony felt sick. People died. In Portugal, number evacuations were successful. In Germany, the church was empty, but the structure was a UNESCO heritage site. 600 years old, gone in 90 seconds. Tony stared at the table. 600 years of history, swallowed by a hole in the ground, because someone had tried to force open something that was meant to stay closed. The vaults respond to intent, Drummond said. You know this. You felt it. When someone approaches with respect and restraint, the system tests them. When someone approaches with force or greed, the system defends. Tony nodded. And the defense is always proportional to the threat. Drummond continued. A small intrusion creates a small response. A sustained assault creates something worse. He leaned forward. Eleanor is planning a sustained assault. The words landed like stones in water. Where? Tony asked. Drummond pointed to a photograph on the table. Italy. A carved stone entrance set into the side of a cliff. The stonework was precise, perfect blocks fitted together, without mortar. Symbols along the lintel, ancient, exact. Near Rome, Drummond said. A vault tied to the collapse of the Roman Republic. It's been dormant for 2,000 years. He paused. Until last week. Tony looked up. Your correction in Wales stabilized that node, Drummond said. But the energy you returned didn't just stay in Wales. The network redistributed it. The way water finds its level. Pressure moved. Other nodes responded. Tony's stomach dropped. I made it worse, he said. No, Drummond said. You made it different. The Welsh vault was destabilizing. You corrected it. But correction creates movement, and movement wakes things that were sleeping. Isla spoke. Precise. Clinical. 3 vaults have shown increased activity since your correction. Italy. A site in Norway, and something beneath the Irish Sea that we haven't been able to locate yet. Tony's jaw tightened. The Irish Sea? Isla nodded. Seismic instruments picked up vibrations that don't match any known geological pattern. The map might show it eventually. It hasn't yet. Tony thought of the new mark on his map. The circle, with the line through it. Near the Severn estuary. He opened his backpack and pulled out the map. Drummond's eyes went to it immediately. Not hungry, not reaching, but interested in the way someone looks at something they've spent a lifetime studying from a distance. Tony unfolded the map on the table. The depot lamp lit the ink. The lines moved, slowly, constantly, breathing. Drummond exhaled. I haven't seen a living map in 40 years, he said quietly. Tony pointed to the new mark near the Severn. What is this? He asked. Drummond and Isla looked at it. Something passed between them. A conversation in glances. Quick, practiced. Isla spoke first. We don't know, she said. It appeared on 2 other maps we've recovered. Same symbol, same location. But none of our records identify what's there. Tony frowned. You have other maps? Fragments, Drummond said. Partial copies. Damaged. Incomplete. Yours is the only living map we've seen in 40 years. A sound echoed through the depot. Metal on metal. Sharp. Both Drummond and Isla went still. Tony's thumb throbbed. Isla's hand moved to her coat. Not reaching for a weapon. Reaching for something in her pocket. Tony caught a flash of metal. A keeper coin. 10 seconds passed. The sound did not repeat. Wind, Drummond said. The roof panels shift. Isla's hand stayed near her pocket for another 5 seconds. Then she relaxed. Barely. As I was saying, she continued, your map is unique. It responds to you. It tracks your movement. It reacts to your decisions. She looked Tony in the eye. That's not a document. It's a system. Tony's skin prickled. He had known this. On some level, he had always known. The map had changed for him, shown him things, warned him, guided him. But hearing someone else say it made it heavier. So, what happens now? Tony asked. Drummond closed the folder. Now, he said, we test you. Tony's body went still. Test me, he repeated. Isla walked to the far side of the table and picked up something Tony hadn't noticed. A cloth bag. Small, heavy, sitting in the shadow of the generator. She set it on the table between them and untied the cord. Inside was an object. A coin, but not like Ruth's keeper coin. This one was larger, thicker. The metal was dark, almost black, with a surface that seemed to absorb the lamplight rather than reflect it. Symbols were carved into both faces. Tiny, dense. The kind of detail that would take a lifetime to decode. Tony stared at it. His blood seal throbbed. The scar on his thumb pulsed with recognition, the same way it had responded to the pedestal in Wales, the same way it had responded to the custodian's voice in Scotland. This coin was part of the network. "Pick it up," Isla said. Tony didn't move. "What is it?" he asked. "A vault artifact," Isla said. "Recovered from a collapsed vault in Portugal in 1987. It's stable, contained. It generates a moderate probability field within a 2-meter radius." She paused. Nothing dramatic. No cliff collapses. No market shifts. Just a gentle, consistent tilt. Tony's eyes moved back to the coin. "Fortune," he said. "Controlled fortune," Drummond said. "The equivalent of what you've been generating naturally, but contained within the artifact. No network cost, no redistribution, no damage to other nodes." Tony felt the pull. He actually felt it. A warmth radiating from the coin. Not aggressive, gentle, inviting, like sunlight through a window on a cold morning, like a hand extended across a dark room. A coin that made the world tilt in your favor without cost, without consequence, without a cliff collapsing somewhere because you got lucky. Clean luck. Tony's mind raced. Maria wouldn't have to worry about bills again. Not because of lottery money that came with invisible debt, but because of a small dark coin that bent probability just enough to make life easier, just enough to keep the good things coming and the bad things away. Trains would arrive on time. Job applications would succeed. The flat would stay safe. The world would lean gently, constantly, permanently in their direction, and nobody would get hurt. Tony's hands moved toward the coin. His fingers were 2 inches away. He could feel the warmth on his skin, the pull in his chest, the quiet voice that whispered, "Take it. You earned it. You walked into a flooding cave and gave back what you stole. You deserve something clean." His fingers stopped. He looked at Isla. Her face was blank, controlled, watching, not his hands. His eyes. He looked at Drummond. The same. Patient, attentive, reading Tony's reaction the way a doctor reads a scan. Not hoping for a particular result, just watching for what was real. Tony's hands flattened on the table. "This is the test," he said. Isla's expression didn't change. "You said you need to know who I am," Tony continued. "So you put an artifact on the table that solves every problem I have, and you watch what I do." Drummond said nothing. Isla said nothing. The depot creaked around them. Wind pushed through the broken windows. Rain tapped the metal roof in a rhythm that sounded like fingers drumming on a desk. Tony looked at the coin. "If I take it," he said slowly, "you know I can be managed. I'm someone who accepts gifts, someone who says yes when the offer is clean enough. You give me the coin. You give me a path. And in return, I'm yours. I work inside your rules. I do what you say. Because you gave me something I wanted." He paused. "And if I don't take it," Isla's voice was quiet, "then we have a different problem." Tony almost smiled, "Because then you can't predict me." Silence. The coin sat on the table. Dark, warm, patient. Tony thought about Maria. He thought about the bills that were paid because of a lottery ticket bought with borrowed luck. He thought about the flat in Ealing, the coat he had bought her. The first night she had slept through, without waking in fear. He thought about the cliff in Wales, the village of 200 people, the cost that nobody had agreed to pay. And he thought about who he was, not who the vault wanted him to be, not who the keepers needed him to be, not who Eleanor feared he might become, just Tony, the boy who fixed broken graves because they deserved better, the son who paid the bills before buying anything for himself, the person who put his hands on a stone pedestal in a flooded cave and gave back what wasn't his. Tony pushed the coin across the table, toward Drummond. "No," he said. The word was quiet, steady, final. Drummond looked at the coin, then at Tony. "Why?" he asked. Tony's answer came without hesitation. "Because clean luck is still luck I didn't earn. And the last time I used luck I didn't earn, a cliff fell on a village." He sat back in his chair. "I'm not taking shortcuts anymore. Not yours, not Eleanor's, not anyone's." The depot was silent. Rain fell. Metal creaked. Somewhere outside, a train passed at speed, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Isla stared at Tony. Something had shifted in her face. Not warmth. Not yet. But the sharp edge of suspicion had dulled, like a blade returned to its sheath. Not because the blade trusted him, but because it no longer needed to be drawn. Drummond picked up the coin. He placed it back in the cloth bag, tied the cord, set it aside, and then, for the first time, he smiled. Small, brief, gone almost before Tony caught it. "Ruth was right about you," he said. Tony exhaled. He thought it was over. It wasn't. Drummond reached into his coat again. A second folder. Thinner than the first. Not manila. White. Clean. The kind of folder that held documents with real signatures. He opened it on the table. Inside was a property listing. A quiet house in Richmond. 2 bedrooms. Small garden. A valuation note clipped behind the photograph. Under that, a medical transfer summary. Maria Reyes. Reduced shift schedule. Managed rota. Private follow to upper view for the shoulder she had been ignoring for 2 years. Under that, a financial instrument. Legal. Clean. Structured through entities older than most banks. Tony stared at the pages. His mouth went dry. "What is this?" he asked, but his voice had changed. The certainty from 30 seconds ago was gone. Drummond's voice was calm. "This offer is real, not theoretical, not supernatural. The keepers can protect. We can move assets, shield employment records, buffer addresses. We do it when the situation requires it." Tony looked at the property listing. The house in Richmond. Light through the windows. A garden where Maria could sit. His chest tightened. "You're doing this now," he said. "Right after the coin." Isla's voice came from across the table. Flat. Precise. "The coin was the easy test," she said. "Refusing stolen power is simple when you've already seen what it costs. Any decent person walks away from that." She paused. "This is the harder one." Tony looked at her. Isla met his gaze without flinching. "This isn't a vault artifact," she said. "This is a house. A doctor. A schedule that doesn't break your mother's body. There's no probability field, no network cost, no cliff collapse, just resources applied to a person who deserves them." She let that land. "So now tell me why you'd refuse." Tony's hands were flat on the table. He could feel the grain of the wood under his palms. The house listing sat between his fingers. Richmond. He could see Maria there, sleeping through the night, buying food, without counting coins in her head, sitting in a garden instead of standing behind a counter for 11 hours. His throat tightened. "This is clean," he said. Half a question. "Legally, yes," Drummond said. "No one pays a price for it. The funds are compartmentalized, lawful, and older than most governments. Your mother would never know the source." Tony's mind was moving fast. Too fast. He could feel himself looking for the reason to say yes. The justification. The moral angle that would let him take this and still be the person who pushed the coin away. Because this wasn't greed. This was his mother's shoulder that hurt every morning. This was the Rhoda that called her in at midnight and released her at noon. This was 20 years of double shifts and cheap shoes and smiling through exhaustion. If Tony could fix that, shouldn't he? "What's the cost?" Tony asked. Drummond answered carefully. "Gratitude is not a contract, but it creates gravity. You would owe nothing on paper, but you would know, and we would know. And the next time we needed you to move quickly, to go somewhere dangerous, to make a choice that might not serve your interests, you would feel the weight of what we gave." Tony stared at him. Drummond had not lied. He had not hidden it. He had laid the mechanism on the table, the way a surgeon lays out instruments before cutting. This was how decent people got leashed. Not with chains, with kindness. Isla spoke again. Her voice was quieter now. Not softer, more precise. "Here's the question you're not asking," she said. "If you refuse this, what exactly is your plan when Eleanor decides that Maria is the fastest way to your obedience?" Tony's blood went cold. Isla continued, "You don't have a network. You don't have resources. You don't have a team. You have a living map and a blood seal and the fact that you once climbed down a cliff without dying. That's brave. But brave doesn't protect your mother when someone puts a car outside her flat at 3 a.m. Tony's jaw tightened. "So what?" he said. "I take the deal. I let you wrap my family in protection I didn't build. And then every time you call, I answer, because I know what you gave." Isla's eyes held his. "That's one reading. What's the other?" "That you accept help from people who are willing to give it. And you trust yourself to know the difference between protection and control." Tony looked away, down the depot, at the rusted gantries and the broken windows, and the weeds growing through dead rails. He thought about the coin he had just pushed away. How clean the refusal had felt. How simple. And now this. The same test, wearing different clothes. Not a dark artifact on a table. A doctor's appointment. A garden. A house where his mother could rest. The world never ended because of one giant decision. It ended because enough small, reasonable exceptions got called love. But Isla was right about something else, too. Refusing every shield on principle was its own kind of selfishness. Clean hands were easy when your mother was the one paying for soap. Tony sat with that for a long time. The depot was quiet. Rain fell. The generator hummed. Somewhere in the building, water found a new path through broken concrete and dripped. Tony looked at the listing again. Then he closed the folder. "I'm not taking the house," he said. Drummond waited. "I'm not taking the financial structure or the rota change or the doctor. Not as a package. Not as something you hand me in a folder and watch me accept." Isla's expression was unreadable. "Why?" Tony's voice was rough. "Not polished. Not the clean certainty of the coin, refusal. Something roar. Because the moment Maria becomes something you gave me, she becomes something you can take away. Even if you never would, even if the thought never crosses your mind, the shape of it is wrong. Protection that lives inside someone else's decision isn't protection. It's a softer cage. He paused. His hands were shaking slightly. He pressed them flat on the table to stop it. But Isla leaned forward, just slightly. Tony continued. If you have ways to reduce the risk to her that don't turn her into a chess piece, I'll listen. Not a house I didn't earn, not a doctor she didn't choose. Practical things. Address shielding so. Eleanor can't find her through a database. Employment protection, so her records stay clean. Emergency extraction. If something real happens. Things that keep her safe without taking her choices away. He looked at Drummond. Limited. Specific. And if I ever find out you've used her to move me somewhere, I wouldn't go on my own. We're done. All of it. I walk. The depot was very quiet. Drummond looked at Tony for a long time. Then he looked at Isla. Something passed between them. Not surprise. Something closer to confirmation. Isla sat back. Her posture changed. Not relaxed. She didn't seem built for that. But the testing edge had gone, replaced by something harder to name. Not trust. Not yet. But the space where trust could begin, if nothing ruined it. That answer was harder than the coin, she said. Tony looked at her. I know, he said. Good, she said. People who think the second test is as easy as the first are the ones who fail it. Drummond closed the white folder. He placed it inside his coat. The listing, the medical summary, the financial instrument, all of it gone. Like it had never been on the table. But Tony knew it had been real. And he knew the offer wouldn't disappear just because the folder was closed. It would sit in the space between them, an open door that Tony had chosen not to walk through, a weight that both sides would carry. That was the cost of saying no to something kind. You had to keep paying for it. The atmosphere in the depot changed. The tests were over. What came next was operational. Eleanor reclassified you, Isla said. We intercepted the communication 3 days ago. Internal acquirer network. Encrypted, but we have sources. Tony's jaw tightened. Reclassified how? From asset of interest to systemic threat. The words hit harder, hearing them from someone else. She's mapping Ruth's network, Isla continued. Every contact, every safe house, every field agent. Eleanor doesn't move fast, but she moves thoroughly. By the end of the month, she'll have the operational structure of every keeper cell in the UK. Tony's stomach tightened. And then? Disruption, Drummond said. Not violence. Eleanor doesn't use violence. She uses exposure, financial pressure, legal challenges, public attention directed at the wrong places. She doesn't need to arrest Ruth. She just needs to make Ruth visible. Tony understood. Visibility was the weapon. The same weapon the vault system used. The same principle Ruth had taught him in Scotland. Being seen was being vulnerable. What can I do? Tony asked. Isla's expression hardened. Right now, nothing. Eleanor's move against the keepers is political, institutional. It's not something you can fix by putting your hands on a stone. The words stung, not because they were cruel, because they were true. So why tell me? Tony asked. Drummond leaned forward. Because Eleanor's reclassification changes your position. You're no longer someone she wants to acquire. You're someone she wants to neutralize. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a meeting and an operation. Tony felt cold settle in his chest. "She'll come after me," he said. "She'll come after everything around you." Isla corrected. "Your finances, your mother's employment records, your college enrollment, every thread that connects Tony Reyes to the normal world. She'll pull them, one by one, until the ground beneath you is too unstable to stand on." Tony thought of Maria. His throat tightened. "The protection we discussed," Drummond said quietly. "The limited version. Address shielding, employment records, emergency protocols. Callum has already begun. Maria's financial profile is in a shielded structure. Her lease is protected. Eleanor can probe, but she won't find a thread to pull." "Not yet." Tony looked at him. "Already begun." Before Tony had even answered the test. Before the white folder. Before the coin. Drummond had already started protecting Maria. Tony opened his mouth. "Closed it. You were going to do it either way," he said. Drummond's face was steady. "The limited version, yes. Regardless of your answer. Then why ask?" Drummond's voice was quiet. "Because knowing what you would accept tells us more than knowing what you would refuse." Tony stared at him. Then he nodded once. He understood. The test had never been about the house. It had been about whether Tony could tell the difference between help that served him and help that owned him. Whether he could draw a line under pressure and hold it. Whether he could accept protection without surrendering judgment. Isla had asked the right question. Not whether he was brave enough to refuse. Whether he was wise enough to know what to accept. "And me?" Tony asked. Isla met his eyes. "You stay useful," she said. "The vault network is waking. 3 new nodes are active. If they destabilize without correction, Eleanor won't need to destroy you. The system will do it for her." She pointed to the Italian vault photograph on the table. "Rome," she said. "The vault beneath the old aqueduct system, connected to the fall of the Republic, dormant for 2 millennia. Now showing thermal signatures and ground vibrations consistent with an activation cycle." Tony's blood ran cold. "Activation cycle," he repeated. "Meaning it's going to open." "Meaning it's going to try," Drummond said. "Whether it succeeds depends on what's inside and who reaches it first." Tony looked at Isla. "And you want me to go?" Isla didn't flinch. "I want the system stabilized. You're the only blood-sealed anchor we have. Ruth can't go. Her network is compromised. Callum is running counter-surveillance in London. Layla and Gareth are managing the whale's recovery." She paused. "So yes, I want you to go, and I'm coming with you." Tony blinked. "You?" "Field coordinator," Isla said. "I've worked vault incidents on 3 continents. I know the protocols, I know the risks, and I know what happens when someone walks into an active vault without backup." Her eyes held steady. "You're brave, Tony. Wales proved that. But brave and prepared are different things. I'd rather you were both." Tony held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he nodded. "When?" Isla checked her watch. 72 hours. "We fly from Bristol. Documents, cover story, and equipment will be ready. Travel light." They talked for another hour. Drummond explained the keeper structure. Not everything, just enough. Concentric rings. The outer ring, Ruth, Callum, Layla, Gareth, handled field operations. Surveillance. Direct intervention. The middle ring coordinated intelligence. Vault monitoring. Signal analysis. pattern tracking across the global network. The inner ring made decisions. Drummond led it. 3 others sat with him. Tony didn't get their names. Isla existed between the middle and inner rings. A bridge. Field experience combined with strategic thinking. She went where the inner circle pointed and made decisions in real time that Drummond couldn't make from a distance. Tony absorbed this. How many keepers total? He asked. Drummond's answer was careful. Fewer than you'd hope. More than Eleanor knows. Tony accepted that. Isla laid out the Italy operation. They would fly into Rome, travel south to a site near the old Appian Way. The vault entrance was beneath a section of the ancient aqueduct system, collapsed and overgrown, accessible through a maintenance shaft that archaeologists had used in the 1960s and then abandoned. The Italians know about it, Tony asked. The Italian government knows about a cave with interesting carvings, Isla said. They do not know about the vault, and they don't need to. Tony frowned. What if it destabilizes while we're inside? Like whales. Isla's voice was flat. Then we correct it. That's what you do. And if we can't, then we get out and we plan differently. Tony looked at her. She was hard to read. Not cold, just contained. Like someone who had learned to keep their reactions in a locked room and only let them out when absolutely necessary. He wondered what had taught her that. Have you been inside a vault before? Tony asked. Isla's expression flickered, brief, controlled. A crack in the wall that sealed itself before light could enter. Once, she said. Norway? 4 years ago. She didn't elaborate. Tony didn't push. But he noticed that Drummond's hand moved slightly on the table when Isla mentioned Norway. A small gesture, almost invisible. The kind of movement someone makes when they want to reach for another person, but know it's not the time. Tony filed that away. The depot creaked. Wind found new gaps in the broken windows. The lamp flickered once. Drummond stood. One more thing, he said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather case. Old, worn. The leather was dark with age and use. Cracked along the spine. He opened it. Inside was a keeper coin. Like Ruth's. Like Gareth's. Old metal. Worn smooth. Heavy in a way that had nothing to do with weight. Drummond placed it on the table. This is not a gift, he said. It's not a weapon. It's not a token of membership. It's a responsibility. Tony looked at the coin. What does it do? He asked. In the field, it can interact with vault boundaries, Drummond said. Minor stabilization. Emergency signaling to other keepers. And in certain vaults, it can slow an activation cycle. Buy time. He met Tony's eyes. Time is the most valuable thing inside a vault. Remember that. Tony reached for the coin, then stopped. He looked at Drummond. Is this another test? Drummond's mouth twitched. The ghost of a smile. No, he said. This is equipment. Take it. Tony picked up the coin. It was cold in his hand, heavier than it looked. The surface was smooth, except for tiny symbols etched into the rim. Too small to read without magnification. Tony closed his hand around it. The blood seal on his thumb responded. A single pulse. Not warm, not cold, just recognition. The coin knew the network. And now Tony carried a piece of it. He put the coin in his jacket pocket. Isla watched him, still assessing, still measuring, but something in the angle of her jaw had softened. Not much, just enough for Tony to notice. 72 hours, she said. Bristol Airport, Terminal 1. Don't be late. Tony stood. He looked at Drummond, at Isla, at the empty depot stretching behind them, at the rusted gantries and broken windows and overgrown tracks and the crack in the floor that traced a symbol nobody had read in centuries. Thank you, he said. Drummond nodded once. Isla didn't respond. She was already packing the folder into a bag. Tony turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed across the concrete. The sound followed him like a second heartbeat. As he passed the crack in the floor, his thumb throbbed one final time. The depot had been built on something, and whatever was down there was patient. Tony pushed through the steel doors and stepped into the rain. Behind him, the depot settled. Metal groaned. Dust shifted, and beneath the concrete. In the dark, where the tracks no longer ran, the symbol in the floor pulsed once. Nobody saw it, but the network felt it. Tony caught the 347 back to London. The train was half empty. He found a window seat and set his backpack between his feet. The keeper coin sat in his pocket. He could feel it against his thigh. Cold, constant. A small weight with a large meaning. Tony pulled out the map. He unfolded it carefully, angling it away from the aisle so no one could see. Wales, gold. Stable, Scotland. Sealed, steady. London, held. And Italy. Tony hadn't noticed it before, but the mark was clear now, near Rome. A color Tony hadn't seen on the map before. Amber, halfway between dormant and alert, halfway between sleeping and waking. The symbol was familiar. The closed eye that Tony had seen in Scotland and Wales. But this one was different. The eye was half open. Tony's skin prickled. A vault waking up. Not from something Tony had done. Not from fortune or probability or any human interference. This vault was responding to the network itself. The correction in Wales had sent energy through the system, like a stone dropped in still water. Rings spreading outward, reaching nodes that had been quiet for centuries. And the Italian vault was listening. Tony traced the amber symbol with his finger. The ink was warm, not hot, curious, as if the vault was wondering who was coming. Tony folded the map. He leaned his head against the window. The glass was cold. England rolled past in the fading light. He thought about Isla, the hardness in her voice, and the brief crack in her expression when she mentioned Norway. He thought about Drummond, the quiet authority, the smile that appeared and vanished like light through a closing door. He thought about the coin test, the pull, the warmth, how close his fingers had come. 2 inches. He had been 2 inches from failing. And then the second test, the house, the doctor, the garden in Richmond. How much harder it had been to say no to something kind than to say no to something powerful. Tony closed his eyes. The train carried him east. Tony got home at 6:42. Maria was in the kitchen. The smell of garlic rice and fried fish filled the flat. Radio on low. A Tagalog song Tony half recognized from childhood. Maria looked up. "Where were you?" she asked. "Ruth needed me for something. Tony said. Work stuff. Maria's eyes narrowed. That look. The one that said, I know you're lying, but I'm choosing not to push. Eat, she said. Tony sat at the table. Maria placed a plate in front of him. Rice, fish, a small bowl of vinegar with crushed garlic on the side. Home. Tony ate slowly. The food was warm and good and real. Maria sat across from him. She didn't eat. She watched. You look tired, she said. I am tired. Different tired, Maria said. Not body tired, head tired. Tony looked at her. She knew. Not the details. Not the vaults or the maps or the network. But she knew her son was carrying something heavier than a backpack. I have to travel, Tony said. In a few days. Short trip. Maria's face tightened. Where? Italy. Maria blinked. Italy? For Ruth's organization. They need someone to check on something. It's safe. The lie tasted like ash. Maria set her hands flat on the table. Palms down. The gesture she made when she was deciding whether to fight or wait. Anthony, she said, I don't know what Ruth does. I don't know what you do when you leave this flat with your backpack and come home with scraped hands. I don't know why you have money or why strange people call you at 3 a.m. Tony went still. She had heard the phone. Maria's voice was steady. But I know you. And I know your father. And you are becoming more like him every day. Tony's throat burned. Is that a good thing? He whispered. Maria's eyes shone. It was the best thing about him, she said. And it's what killed him. The kitchen was very quiet. The radio played. The rain tapped the window. The garlic rice cooled on Tony's plate. Maria reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Come home, she said. Whatever you do, wherever you go. Come home. Tony squeezed her hand. I will, he said. He meant it, but meaning it and keeping it were different things. And both of them knew that. Later that night, Tony sat on his bed. The flat was dark. Maria was asleep. The rain had stopped. Tony held the keeper coin in one hand and the map in the other. The coin was cold, steady, a constant presence. The map was warm, shifting, alive. Tony looked at the amber symbol near Rome. It was brighter now, just slightly, as if the vault had noticed him looking. His thumb throbbed. He thought about what Drummond had said. 300 vaults, 700 years of keepers, a global system, connected by ancient rules that nobody fully understood. And Tony, 19 years old, cemetery hands, borrowed luck fading, was about to fly to Rome and walk into a vault that had been sealed since the Roman Republic fell. He should have been terrified. He was, but underneath the fear, something else lived. Quiet, steady, familiar. Purpose, not chosen, not dramatic, not the purpose of heroes in stories. The purpose of someone who sees a broken thing and fixes it, who pays bills before buying things for himself, who gives back what isn't his, even when keeping it would be easier. Tony folded the map. He put the coin on his bedside table. He turned off the light, and in the darkness, the map glowed. Not gold, not red, amber, a color Tony had never seen before. A vault, waking beneath ancient stone, and somewhere much deeper in the network, past the hills and the sea, and 2,000 years of silence, something very old opened one eye and waited